Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2010 horror remake, The Crazies. Now, The Crazies is one of those films to me personally that is actually better than the original. I love Romero. He's one of my favorite directors, but I've never really been a big fan of his The Crazies. I felt like it was a disappointment. I've always felt like it was a very boring and dull movie that wasn't as engaging or as compelling as it could have been. So, The Crazies to me has always been something that I felt could have been remade, and I feel the remake is a better movie than the original because it actually takes a lot of the elements that the original had and it not only carries them over, but it improves on a lot of them. And it winds up honestly resolving a lot of the issues that I had with the original film. That being said, it's still got some issues, but I definitely would say that I feel that this is a superior film to the original. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, I would like to give a special shout out to Dawn for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Crazies is directed by Breck Eisner, who prior to this he did a indie film called Thought Crimes, and then he followed that up with a box office bomb in Sahara. And then he did this film, which wasn't really a massive success either. And then after this, he did one other feature film in The Last Witch Hunter, and that was the last film that he directed. I think if you look at his entire filmography, he's actually got some better work here than some other directors who have longer filmographies, but he just didn't have a movie that was a massive hit. And that's how Hollywood works. Oh, you haven't directed a movie that was massively successful in the box office? Well, yeah, we're not really gonna give you a lot of opportunities. Even though the Crazies actually made a profit, but it wasn't like a significant profit. It was like a $20 million movie, made like 54 million worldwide, but it wasn't like it was a giant hit. And that just made Breck Eisner into somebody that really wasn't on the studio's radar for a long time. So that's why he went back to television and he made his mark there with The Expanse, which I'm really glad. I'm really glad that Eisner was able to find his footing again as a director because he's pretty good. Like his direction in this is, in my opinion, for the most part, great. I don't really have a lot of issues with his direction at all. I think a big part of why this film has so many scenes that have white knuckle and nail biting suspense is because of his direction, the way that he framed the shots, the way that he uses camera angles. In particular, I really like his usage of wide shots. They really give this film a very epic size and scope to it, despite it taking place in a small farming town. And I really feel that this is a director who definitely understood the assignment and then some. He's creating a horror thriller. He's got to create a certain sense of claustrophobia in certain scenes. He's also got to create a sense of frenzied drama as well as suspense. And he definitely does that. I mean, there's a lot of scenes in this that are really intense. And I think a good part of the reason why they work as well as they do is because of the way that Eisner directs them. So I think Eisner, he really did a genuinely great job directing this movie. And it should have been something that would have led to him getting more work afterwards, but it just wasn't meant to be. I mean, I think he was attached to the Escape from New York remake that ultimately didn't get made. And I'm glad because we didn't need that. And I think it would have been really unfortunate if he was just known as a remake director, because I think he actually did a good job with Sahara. He was honestly the least of that film's problems, and the same thing applies to his direction here. I genuinely feel the direction in this is a highlight. It's a standout. It's a big part of why I like the movie, because I think Eisner did an excellent job directing it. Now, the screenplay by Scott Kozar and Ray Wright, most of the time, I think it is on the right path and it does the right thing. But there are a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's a handful of moments where it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, go in the proper direction. And I think it kind of hurts the film a little bit. And I also feel that it could have added a couple things to make it more engaging overall. But I do feel that it's a good screenplay for the most part. And it starts off rather well with the opening of the film, establishing the cast of characters uh, and the fictional town of Ogden Marsh in Iowa. So you've got uh, this guy named Rory, who is a resident of the town, who just suddenly snaps one day, winds up going to a baseball field with a shotgun, and he winds up getting shot dead by the sheriff in David Dutton. And then there's another resident who starts to act weird, and it seems like there's something wrong with him. And then this guy named Bill, he just winds up locking his wife and his kid in the farmhouse and then lights the farmhouse on fire in a really harrowing scene. And the way that the Crazies are handled here is so much better than the original, because you see things escalate to more of a genuine frenzy. It's not just honestly, it seems like a bunch of people that are just drugged up and that's really about it. Like things escalate and people genuinely become mad and riddled with some kind of disease. And it starts to spread throughout the town. Different people are starting to become more and more sick. David finds the corpse of a pilot in a nearby swamp, and they find a military aircraft that crashed into the river a few days earlier. And then they start investigating. The sheriff, as well as his fellow deputy and Russell, and they start investigating what's going on. And that's when things start to escalate even further, where there's a really tense scene in the morgue where the coroner, who's now infected with the crazy virus, uh, he winds up attacking David, and then they wind up killing the guy with an electric saw. And prior to that, like, they realized that I think it was like a priest or a pastor, he's actually alive despite being sewed up. So the guy has his eyes and his mouth sewed up and he's still alive. And just the thought of that really creeps me out, to be honest. And being in that guy's shoes. Of course, you know that he's only still alive because of the virus and it's not because of anything else. But that was just a really disturbing sequence. And then a bunch of soldiers show up and they start quarantining everybody. And if anyone has a fever, they get quarantined. Well, David has a wife who's pregnant, and Judy, and she has a fever because she's been pregnant, and so she gets taken away to the local high school, which is now the quarantine zone. And there's this really intense, uh, suspenseful scene with this denizen, the citizen of the town who has a pitchfork, and he's scraping it around on the ground, and he's killing all these different people that are strapped up in these gurneys one by one. And there's nothing they could do. They're completely helpless. Just grabbing the pitchfork, stabbing it right through their chests. And Judy is the next victim. The next target for this crazed guy with a pitchfork. But her husband shows up and saves her. I will say that is one thing that could have been handled a little bit better with this script. Is there's a lot of moments where, oh, it's gonna go this way, but then last minute somebody shows up and saves the day. Like that happened a little too often. But because David is now taken away his wife as well as this other woman named Becca, they're on the run from the military. And the stuff with the military, I think they could have expanded upon that more too. There's really not a lot of scenes of the military doing a lot. I think they should have shown more of that, to be honest. Especially when we have this scene later on where this guy named Babcock, he finds the two, well, that's not two, he finds the remaining survivors. The people, who have escaped from the quarantine zone, and David, Judy, Russell, and Becca. And as well as this other guy, because they went to his farmhouse, and then this guy winds up getting killed by the military, and his family gets murdered by the military as well. They get lit on fire in a pretty intense sequence. But Babcock is a part of that team, and he encounters the survivors in the farmhouse hiding, but they're able to get him to sympathize with them and agree to let them go. And he lies and covers for them, but then you never hear from that character again. So I think that was definitely something that you could have seen more of, like more of Babcock, have him be involved more with the plot and with this group of characters instead of just lying and then leaving and then just being gone from the movie. And I definitely feel there could have been a couple more crazy attacks within like the first hour of the movie, because there are some scenes, there are some moments throughout this script and the story where it honestly kind of drags a little bit. And I think it's honestly because there's not a lot happening. It's just people hiding around or talking. But once you get past the hour mark and you get to the scene in the nursery, and then you follow that up with the sequence in the car wash, it's just relentless suspense and tension. And in my opinion, it's a masterclass of suspense and tension when it comes to that particular point. The nursery scene is just incredible. I really like the idea that David winds up taking out one of the crazies with a knife that was stabbed into his hand. Like he just pulls the knife out of the ground with it still in his hand, and then uses the knife in his hand as a weapon to kill this crazed woman. And then the car wash sequence. I was on the edge of my seat throughout that entire sequence. And it's a testament to the quality of the writing to take something as innocuous and as innocent and as harmless as a car wash and turn it into a horror show. And then after that point, members of the group start getting taken out. So that's when Becca winds up getting taken out by the Crazies, gets hung. Uh, that's also, um, I wouldn't say that's exactly when Russell starts to lose it, but it's definitely one of the last moments when he wasn't showing signs of having the crazy virus, because when it's just Russell, David, and Judy, and they're wandering around trying to figure out what to do next, Russell winds up losing it. He takes out a car, a van that David was trying to commandeer for them. He shoots the guy who was the driver of the van before David was able to get all the information out of him. That leads to a very tense standoff between David and Russell at gunpoint, where David eventually gets the gun away from Russell, and Russell breaks down and realizes he's not doing too well. I was kind of surprised they didn't kill him right then and there, considering he was infected. But I guess this virus works in a way where if you haven't gotten it after 48 hours, you're fine. So you're not going to get the virus with some kind of close contact with somebody that's infected. So that explains why he's able to not get the virus despite stabbing this woman who's infected with an open wound, because it's already been 48 hours. So he's not going to be somebody who's going to catch the virus. And I was kind of like, really? They're just going to let him live? But then I thought about it. I'm like, okay, he's not really a risk in terms of infection. And it leads to him having a good moment where he is able to distract the military so David and Judy can cross a certain checkpoint. And then it leads to a scene in a truck stop, which is another sequence that's just a masterclass of suspense. Because you have these roving, this roving group of killers who were completely psycho before they even got the crazy virus, and now they're even crazier. That's a really terrifying thought to me. That you could have a group of people that is already completely off the reservation, that are already completely insane, and are killing people because it's kind of insinuated that they're cannibals or they're thrill killers, and now they are infected with a crazy virus. So it leads to a really great finale, in my opinion, in the truck stop, which has some really intense, really suspenseful, really tension filled confrontations with these crazed killers. With either Judy when she's alone in the cab of the semi truck and then shoots one of them in the head, or even prior to that when she's hiding in the meat locker trying to stay away from them, and the whole bit with David getting into a fight with one of them um, under underneath, like in the area where people are working on the truck and stuff like that. So he's working in the mechanics underbelly in the facility, and actually wasn't working there. He was hiding in there, and then this other guy, this crazed guy, this big, tall, burly motherfucker shows up and starts wrecking him. And then he has to find a way to try to take this guy out. And he takes him out, lights him on fire, gets out of the well just in time before the fire engulfs him, gets the keys, he and his wife drive away in the semi. But it's not over yet because the military has decided to nuke the town. And so they have to get away from the nuke just in time, but they aren't able to, and the nuke explodes, and then the truck gets flipped over. And it leads to a gorgeous shot where they're looking back at what was left of the town, uh, as it's been obliterated by a nuclear bomb and or a missile. It's just you just see the mushroom cloud and the orange uh, lighting up the sky and just fire everywhere. It's a really good shot. But that's one moment that makes me that's definitely a part of the script that I don't care for because of the fact that they didn't get far enough away from the fallout and they were exposed directly to the blast. They're screwed. They are dead as a doornail. I mean, the truck got flipped over, the windows got blown out. They got exposed to a massive amount of radiation from the fallout and the explosion itself and the shock wave. So they're and then they got out and then they were exposed to even more. They're goners. They're gonna die of radiation sickness or cancer in no time because they were exposed to such an extreme amount. And then, okay, that's already depressing enough. And then you have the ending where, okay, they're walking to the city through these fields of, I think, like corn or some other kind of, um, maybe it's wheat or something else. So they're just walking through these fields and they see the city up ahead. And then there's this I guess another a satellite that has located them from the military and is basically now going to initiate the containment protocol in Cedar Rapids, this other town. And then there's some other stuff in the mid credits that show the carnage and basically insinuate that it's all going to happen again. And I don't really care for that because there was no sequel. So this is just a sequel bait ending that doesn't really lead to anything. And it's already a film that's dark and bleak enough as it is. You don't need to basically insinuate that your two survivors are toast. It just kind of makes the movie not as effective to me as a story. I know a lot of people like that because it's dark and it's not a happy ending, but it wouldn't have been really that much of a happy ending anyway if they didn't have the whole initiate containment protocol because they probably were likely goners anyway because of the radiation poisoning. But I think honestly, it's fine enough as it is to leave it ambiguous. Like, okay, they get far enough away from the blast that they aren't exposed enough to the radiation that it becomes ultimately fatal. And you could still have a cool shot of them looking back and seeing the devastation. You don't really have to do that as up close as they did to get a nice looking shot. And then you have David and Judy just walking through the field with the city ahead of them, and then end credits. You can it's a fine enough sequel bait thing because it sets it up where okay, you got two survivors are going to another town. They don't know whether or not it's been affected or not. And you can come to your own conclusions. You could do the whole thing where, oh well, maybe they don't make it. Maybe they go to the town and it's infected and they get killed there, or maybe the containment protocol initiative starts again and they have to deal with that, and maybe one or both of them die during all of that. You don't have to end it the way that it does. It's not necessary. It's already something that's bleak and dark and depressing. I mean, there's a whole scene where a guy kills his whole family and burns them alive. Like you don't really have to have a ending that just doubles down on that kind of emotion. I really don't feel that was necessary. But that's just me personally. And the ending is definitely a big part of why I like the movie, but I don't love it. And as well as some other things. Like I would have liked to have a couple more Crazies attacks within the first hour of the movie and the military be involved more. Whether it's Babcock and his character being involved more in the plot, or maybe just the military in general doing more things with the citizens. Actually show the scene where they burn everybody alive. They burn the infected and people who aren't infected with the flamethrowers. That would have been really uh, uh, impactful, if you ask me. But you just see the aftermath. Now, the film features, in my opinion, for the most part, a pretty good cast. Timothy Olyphant is David. I would say this is arguably one of his better performances as a lead in a feature film, but a lot of his cadence, a lot of the way that he was carrying himself, I don't know, maybe it was the accent, but it sounded like he was either trying to be Billy Bob Thornton or Bill Paxton. And it just made me think of, man, I wish either one of those actors were the lead in this instead of Timothy Olyphant. Like, he wasn't terrible, he was just okay. He was just fine. And I feel like a better actor would have made the film even better than it is. Because Radha Mitchell, to me, was significantly better than Timothy was when it comes to her performance. I thought she was honestly great. Um, she went through a whole gamut of emotions throughout this and handled them all really well. And Joe Anderson, I also liked as Russell. I felt he also delivered a solid and believable performance. Danielle Panabaker was fine as Becca. She wasn't in it that much, so there's not really a whole lot to say. But she did fine with the short role that she had. Christy Lynn Smith as Deirdre was also decent. So was Brett Rickaby as Bill, and Preston Bailey as Nicholas, and John Alward as Mayor Hobbs, and Joe Regan as Babcock. Joe was good enough that I wanted to see more of his character, but you didn't really get more of him. If you did, I don't remember that. That kind of flew by me if they did do more of that character, but I don't think they did actually. And then you also had Lynn Lowry, who portrayed Kathy in the original movie. She has a cameo in this as a woman on a bike. So, like, she plays one of the infected that's riding around on a bicycle at one point in this movie. So that's a nice little callback to the original. But yeah, I mean, Timothy Olyphant, he's not awful. He's not bad. He's not talking through his teeth all the time like he did in Live Free or Die Hard. But he just doesn't have that charisma to me that Bill Paxton or Billy Bob Thornton or some other actor might have had, like Thomas Jane. And the film features some cinematography by Maxime Alexandre. And despite the fact that it's a pretty bleak movie, it almost has this post-apocalyptic look to it with all the empty parts of the town and the military running around and the dark lighting and the gloomy nature of it. It's a well-shot film. It actually looks quite good from a cinematography perspective. And I also feel that it had some good editing by Billy Fox. Now, the score by Mark Isham, to me, it's kind of a mixed bag of a score. Like, it's a score where I'm like, okay, there are some pieces that I like, especially the one near the end that is supposed to be the more triumphant piece of music. But a lot of it is just very atmospheric, just very mood music. And sometimes the score is a little too much in terms of really overplaying some jump scares and certain scenes and making them not as suspenseful or as intense as they could have been because the score just is a little too overbearing. But a lot of the time, though, it's not even overbearing. It's just something you barely even notice. So I definitely don't feel it's one of his better scores overall, but it's not a bad score. It's just not a score that's really anything other than average for me personally. There is some gore, there are some practical effects, but it's not a gore fest. So you don't really get that with this movie. But the effects are well done. Like I said, I do feel that it kind of suffers from some pacing issues at points. So that's why I feel that it kind of drags a little, despite it only being like an hour and 30 something minutes to the end credits. But I mean, without the end credits, because with the end credits, it's like an hour and 40 something minutes. But it's paced all right. Like it's paced decently enough. It's not too tedious and boring. And yeah, I would genuinely recommend it. I would say like if you like films that deal with like zombies or an outbreak, this is definitely something that I think you should definitely check out sometime. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on the Crazies. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.